Hey, this is Nicholas and Fabio, and we are currently in a coffee chat, and we wanted to discuss one of the recent comments from Fabio in our Slack channel about using the guidelines we have how to design and architect our software. And we want to maybe do a series now about all of these anti-patterns that we have in our code base and how we could prevent them or how we can refactor them. And Fabio picked today a great example how to extract the service desk code from the project model. And yeah, I will ask a few questions and Fabio will walk us through. So
Mhm.
maybe Fabio, you want to share your screen and
Yeah,
maybe walk us through the decision process and like how you went with this.
sure. I've so what we are going to talk primarily today about is this guideline about taming omniscient classes. So we have a big classes like project and how can we extract functionality out of project. Most of the time we have methods in project or other God classes that are not intrinsically related to it, but might be domain specific code or concepts that are better extracted out of project. And so we have some examples here, but I spotted something yesterday in the code base, so it could be like a good example of to talk about this in a merge request. So what I did was I looked at the project model, and I'm going to close this for a second. So we normally what I looked at is cluster of methods as a starting point. So I noticed service desk something everywhere. So okay, this could be like a good starting point. And what I want, so I realized that there are different methods that depend on other methods that are defined here. So okay, let's understand, what this code does and how we can extract that. The first thing I did is I created a class and I called project service desk project settings. Just because I wanted to be something scoped to a project where we can pass in a project, then some service desk stuff, come from there. I still, I didn't have, I'm still not like a domain expert in service desk. So I'm trying to uh, learn from this process. So I didn't put much effort into the actual name, and we can see at the very end how what could have been done slightly different. But I wanted to have a bucket, a class or something where I can start to move methods from projects into there and reference them. So what I did is I copied methods, all these methods over, and I start to have a look at the the usage of these methods. Uh, and then I'll always, at the end, I rename the methods to something that I feel make more sense. But initially, I copied everything. So what you can see here, system address or alias address are actually the copies from service desk system address, service desk, alias address are this. I just removed eventually service desk prefix, um, and I moved it.
Yeah. This,
But
for example, sorry to
yeah,
jump in. So, for example, this to me is like this is already a huge change because I mean, if you don't remove the methods in the project model, if you would remove the projects, the model, not methods in the project model, you would immediately have failed tests, doesn't work
mhm.
anymore. Um, would you, for example, do an approach? One other approach that I could think of, but I would tackle is when I have absolutely no domain expertise. I would create the new model that they created in one of these methods, like the service desk address, for example, with the project, and then
Yeah.
call the other. So I could refactor this like slowly. In this case, it might
Oh,
be really,
obvious. Yes, yes, and that's
yeah.
what I did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So what I did initially is like having, um, let me maybe just open here. Let's see. I removed all the methods in this, but what I had initially, I just put something here. I had a service desk that is initializing that new model that I had. So service desk project settings, new sub. And I had this, okay?
I see.
Then all other methods that are here, let's say this one, I just copy this over as it was before. I had this, so no, in order not to break this method, I just did service desk dot this service desk dot this one, right? So, and then when I renamed the methods, I renamed here, remove this, and end up with this. So this method still remains, and I check, for every usage of these methods in the code, I check to see where that is being used, and realize, and understand whether can I have that code pointing directly to this code, so bypassing project entirely, or should I go through project necessarily? So initially I went through project, but the project was delegating. So everything, all the methods were delegating eventually to this object. But eventually I start moving things away, removing things from project, and using directly the service desk. What is interesting is that in this code here, if we don't, every methods are public, and it's not very clear, what are the necessary methods here? What are the concept we have defined? Only after I moved things across and I checked the usage of every methods, I realized there is like 40% of these methods could actually be private. And this is what we ended up with. So we have some methods that I realized they're actually not used anywhere else than the methods up here. So let's move them into private. And they're not used anywhere, directly from project. So we improved the code in many ways. We extracted code from project. We created a domain-specific object that deals with addresses. Maybe this could, be renamed in something like addresses. But also reduce the interface, because some of the concepts are now private, then don't need to be exposed. And so overall improved the code that way. Another interesting aspect was that I left this at the very end. Here, I left this code here, but what we have here is actually, so originally I moved all other methods and left this at the very end because it was slightly more complex. So what you see here is that we have this method that calls this enabled, passing itself inside. And then when we look at service desk, that existing code, that actually calls the supported method, which is over here with a domain specific method, which is okay, but then calls this project attribute, because service desk enabled is actually being overridden here. So there is this kind of strange side effect by having everything defined in a project. And when I moved things out, I actually realized I could refactor this better. So where we ended up is, so this can be dangerous, because if you don't use the attribute, through square brackets, you can have circular execution. But also we are calling into service desk domain here. The service desk domain calls back into project attribute. So even this kind of circular dependency, it's strange. So I wanted to eventually remove this entirely, and I managed to remove it. But the way I did, it was by I turned this into this enabled. So now you call service desk supported, which is domain specific method, and we check if this setting is enabled. but we have removed the override on this service desk enabled, which now makes it even safer. And so, yeah, and I end up removing even that. What do we have over here? Service desk. I removed this entirely because it was not very safe. What is important? Something that I think is important to check when we do the refactoring that I do all the time is if I'm extracting something from project, for example, I want to be able to pass in the project, but a good signal whether I'm going the right direction or not is how much the new code depends on project. So if you are passing in project, but a lot of the code kind of circles back into the project model, then either is the wrong abstraction, maybe there's something else either you have to pull in, or probably you have to rethink, your strategy again. In this case, I think it turns out to be pretty good because you don't want to depend too much on project, but also you want to depend only on kind of basic information about the project, like intrinsic data. And so in this case, if we look at project dot, and look into this class, project here. So we depend on this service desk enable, which is a setting in the project table, unfortunately, because like it could have been, something like actually we do have service desk setting model, and maybe that could have gone in there, but it's okay because this is like a domain information that are inside service desk, and it's okay. The other part where we depend on project is the full path slug, which is fine. It's intrinsic project information. Again, the setting and the project ID, which is perfect. We are not depending too much on other information from project. So this is a good extract.
Yeah, what I liked a lot about this is like you didn't have the domain knowledge, but you see these patterns. As you said, like in the beginning, you have methods that are beginning with service desk, underline something, and you can extract all of that. So you ended up with this here, and you already said like the class name might not be perfect. So how would you, first you mentioned how much it depends on project, and I understand that. For example, here, like we again call project service desk enabled. It's setting. Would you prefer that to be encapsulated again somewhere else? Like we have these, I mean, we now have this weird thing of like we have project settings as part of this class. Is this like should this be in there somewhere? Like should this be somewhere else?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal will be to probably move into service desk setting table that we already have. Maybe have like an enabled column there. Because those service settings are mapped to project ID. So in that case, all you need is a project. Even you don't even depend on this. You just use the project ID to actually fetch the settings.
And I know like we don't have enough domain knowledge about this, but when I look at this class now, okay, that's the enabled one that we might even go to a project setting, a service desk setting table. But when I look at the other methods, I see like all addresses or address, system address. So we have now the suffix compared to what we had before with the prefix of all the methods. How would you go by that? Like you would say like, this is fine. We don't have maybe enough domain knowledge, or would you rethink this again to say like, okay, this is maybe not about project settings, but about addresses?
Yes. So I would either do this, maybe call service desk addresses, and probably.
And this enabled that, I think when you call it addresses, like it's very visible then that enabled shouldn't be in there, right?
Yes. So in that case, either I would move this back into service desk here, enabled. But since we have removed now the service desk enabled override, that probably can become safer again. So I can use that. So that could be one way. So you have to, you still maintain this, but you make that specific. Another thing could be, I think we need to look into the service desk settings. To understand like what data is here, what behaviors. See, we also have custom email verification. I'm not sure, but there is settings and related to probably various things, custom email. It's like another way. Do we merge the new extracted class, with service desk setting? Because that is project specific. So it's for project level. So maybe another way, in practice, what I wrote here. Where's that? Project setting. Final notes, this class could potentially be merged with service desk setting. If we want to have something that is about settings more in general, that could be a way. I think I would probably try to explore making this specific about addresses, extract this out, so which make very, very specific. And all the code that is in here, except for this enable, is actually very
address centric. Yeah.
You said, yeah, there's a strong cohesion here, which is good.
Yeah.
And you can test this in isolation. There's a lot of things you can do.
That's definitely one of the reasons like why are we doing this that I can see is definitely the test in isolation. Like addresses, you can write easily tests for all of these scenarios. But also could be the case, especially in this regard, we don't do any database checks, so maybe we can even use a fast spec helper if possible. So way better to test and to run this and develop locally.
Yeah, I think this might pull the routes, but yeah, it definitely the whole setup and everything makes a lot easier.
Yeah.
Another kind of heuristics that I use to understand if I'm going in the right direction is also to look at other constants. So what I notice here is that we have also service desk email, which is in line with what the refactoring we are doing here. And actually, as if you point out, if we make this more service desk addresses, yeah, it probably is even stronger correlation with this. And also let's have a look at the code, what the code looks like after I extracted this, the existing code. So if we look, for example, maybe start with namespace. Space. Actually, I removed some delegation, which was good. With delegating service desk from namespace into project and from project into the new classes, and actually that was also removed entirely. But there was something else. It's here how we are using this. So before was like a lot of this is enabled. Well, as you say, this could become simply service desk enabled without the project setting. But what is interesting is that by looking at the constant, you already start to see that you are stepping into another domain to ask for that information. While before is not really obvious. Service desk enabled is it a different domain or is it part of project? And when we look more in other existing code, you actually see this is also related to service desk, custom email verification. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's good that now we are seeing an alignment between this domain, service desk custom verification, and service desk here as well. So we are aligning now, we are moving in code from project into where it actually belongs. And we are not leaving that domain to go to project to ask information about our domain. It's important also that all the information is within that domain. And you can see this more with other things like notification service, or well, entities are a bit different because entity we serialize a lot of stuff. Service desk handler is another scenario here where we do check if the service desk is enabled. So it's again,
this would be also when I look at the path, it's like GitLab email handler. It's like
yes.
it's a
So
very
this will
generic
be
one about service desk handling in the email
exactly.
on the
So
context. Yeah.
then the next would step would be start moving things also inside service desk namespace. So it becomes clear that we are not leaving the domain. You know, we are trying to use as much as possible of the code within the domain that we have. Yeah, and you can see like a lot service desk custom email. Obviously, like we are now reusing this inside, which makes it more explicit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think it's a great example of the refactoring and how you spot these things that can be grouped together, right? And yeah,
Yeah,
especially with the bounded contexts. I mean, sidebar is a very special thing because it goes into everything, but makes a lot of sense and it's good to see there.
yeah. And what was is interesting is that I actually we remove everything. We didn't have to leave a link to service desk that I originally created during the refactoring, as
Yeah.
you know, as to step into the refactoring bit by bit. But actually, in the end, is that this code can be removed entirely. So now a project doesn't know about service desk.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, but there's still some association and things like that. But a lot of the code and this behavior was removed out. And if we keep iterating on this, we actually improve this even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this was a great example. So thanks a lot for this one. And I guess we will continue with other ones in the future with other recordings about refactorings. So thanks a lot. I was just
Thank you,
stopped the
Nicholas.
recording.